But what about Uzzah? No doubt that's a question some of us may have been left asking as we looked at 2 Samuel 6 on Sunday and thought about finding freedom in worship using David as our example. Uzzah featured in the story, but we didn't dwell on him that much because he wasn't as relevant to what we were talking about last week. And yet, I know what happened to him may have left us asking some difficult questions. How could a good God strike down a man simply for touching the Ark of the Covenant in an attempt to stop it from falling to the floor? Well, to help us understand, we're going to take a bit of a closer look at what happened to Uzzah and why. The first thing we have to understand is that Uzzah, by coming to the ark, was entering into the presence of God. We're told in Exodus 25 that God's presence dwells atop the Ark of the Covenant, and lots of other Old Testament passages reference that. That's why in 1 Samuel 5, when the Ark of the Covenant is brought into the Philistine temple, the statue of Dagon, the idol, falls to the floor and smashes into pieces, because no idol may stand in the presence of God. And the thing we have to understand about the presence of God is it's a dangerous place to enter as sinful and unholy people. God is like a great big burning star of holiness, of goodness. So how can people who are flawed like us come close in the same way that how can people come close to the sun? Well, the answer we see in Scripture is that we have to be led there by a king who is following God's law perfectly, who takes God's law seriously. And King David at this time is not doing that. He's really casual about God's law, and we see that in the way that he handles the Ark of the Covenant. And so that's a dangerous position for Uzzah to be in, to be led into the presence of God by that kind of king. And so we're told that God's anger or his wrath goes out against Uzzah. And what we have to understand about God's anger or God's wrath is it's not like our anger. It's not God flying off the handle. It's not him losing control. It's not unpredictable. It's not something that's arbitrary. No, it is something that is deliberate, that is sober, that is tied to his holiness. It's the natural reaction of a perfect God against sin. And so that's what Uzzah comes face to face with, because he's being led into God's presence by a king who's not taking God's law seriously. The good news for us is we follow a king who took God's law so seriously that he went to the cross to pay the price for us breaking God's law. And he did that so that when we follow him, that perfect king, we can come into God's presence without having to worry about being the subject of God's wrath in the way that Uzzah was. And so that's why it's so important that we call people to follow Jesus, to follow that king, so that we can enter the presence of God for all eternity. The other person I know people might have been scratching their heads about is Micah. Why was she cursed at the end of the passage, you might be asking? For simply mocking David. It seems like she's told she's not going to have any more children. Well, I'm not sure that it necessarily is a curse. Perhaps it's more likely that this is the Bible telling us that David and Micah's relationship never recovered from this moment, that they were never intimate with one another again, and so no more children came along. In fact, from this point on, Michal moves to the margins and is not mentioned again in Scripture, a sign that she's no longer a major feature in David's story. I hope that helps us to wrestle through these passages and come closer to God as we do so.